the stealthy hunting dog. Got our eyes locked on a bear about 300 yards away, easily. It's crazy. All right, what's going on, world? What's going on today? I don't even know what day it is. What day is it? Tuesday? Crazy. Tuesday. I ended up having to tear my whole fucking wall apart again last night and redo it. Holy shit. Because I did some screw up coming into my door. Had to stagger all the boards over again and carry on going around that corner, cutting around the light switch and the thermostat switch. But anyway, what am I doing? I've got Bobbie Short's book in front of me, and there's so much. I mean, look at this. This isn't the whole book. This is stuff that we apparently haven't even read. And it's this chapter is called Behaviors. And there's so much. There's no way I can read them all here. But I'm going to read some. For sure. But I'm going to see what I got from the people here first. This is a big thing on turkey hunting. And I know there's a lot of people, especially my south of the border family, who have wild turkeys on their mind right now. This turkey season's coming. And I will be in Alabama for that. All right. What do we got here? Here's a short one. Looks like I got emailed twice, maybe. Well, I watch every day to hear my story, and you're starting to repeat old stories. I have several stories to tell. First Nations, 2 dogs. And then here's another part below. Hello, Steve. Call me 2 dogs. I spend 300 days a year in the mountains and the rivers. Mom said when I was born, I came out walking, fishing pole in one hand and a rifle in the other. I've had numerous encounters with the wild man and other creatures in the woods. The story I tell today happened last week after the windstorm. My auntie was driving to a relative's home and a tree was blown across the road. She looked left, and on the side of the road was a full-grown Bigfoot looking at her and looking at the tree. Then the large being walked over to the tree and pushed it off the road and walked off back into the timber. I thought that was pretty cool. I have lots of stories. I'm not good with technology. Hope this email reaches you. Stay safe. Okay, man. It reached me. I'm going to put this as look into so I can search your name and see if you send me anything else. And if you're still here, send me more. Or if you think somebody can give you a hand on a laptop and get the camera working, maybe you can come on here and talk to me and just tell it all to me instead of typing it out. And let me know if that might be a possibility, maybe. Who's next? What have we got here? Hope I didn't read this. 2 emails stacked up in this folder. The same person. Hi, Steve. Thanks for the reply and advice on blazing it with the flashlight. Part of my recollection that early morning for not turning on my light was, I don't think I want to see whatever this is, so I didn't tempt fate. You're spot on. I should have lit it up. Then I would have known instead of wondering, still to this day. I also would have surely quit hunting. So I have another story to share, albeit a secondhand story from a coworker. He asked me a couple months back if he could leave work early to go with his folks camping. I jokingly said to him, no problem, just watch out for the Sasquatches. They're thick up there in northern Wisconsin. I was completely blindsided with his remarks when he replied by saying to me, my mom's seen one. I said, you're just talking shit now, aren't you? Expecting him to say, ha, I got you. But I realized he wasn't BSing me one bit. He said his mom was a passenger in the back seat of her parents' car back in '06 when she was simply staring out the window at the countryside around dusk when she sees an 8-foot-tall, hairy being walking on 2 legs with long arms. She remembers this sighting so vividly, still to this day like it happened yesterday. She said this thing was walking briskly, almost at a jog on a high embankment, approximately 80 to 100 yards from the road. I did some research, and there actually was 2 other separate reports of encounters by bow hunters that same year in the same general area, Mount Horeb/New Glarus, Wisconsin. I too think it's BS our government doesn't come clean on the known existence of these things. I think though at some point there will be a tipping point on this, and the feds will someday release a flood of information followed by some garbage excuse for not acknowledging sooner. It's just my thoughts. Keep the videos coming. Good stuff. Showed my dad some of your vids while he was visiting today. The video explaining your attempt to break the language barrier and the whole gerbil thing had us in tears. That's my guiding story of trying to talk to that guy from Hungary. Dad says I would have had an absolute blast with that guy in the bush for a week. Good luck and be safe up there as well, Scott. Okay, and there was my reply to him. And here is his first email. So I'm guessing I'm going backwards. My story isn't going to be dramatic, but it's, however, a story I find myself replaying over and over in my mind for the past 10 years or so since the encounter. My encounter is one that begins in the early pre-dawn hours, approximately an hour and a half before sunrise. On this brisk fall morning, I was very quietly walking to my bow stand, located on the edge of a 250-acre piece of property I hunt, which also borders a section of the Ice Age Trail here in south-central Wisconsin. I can't get to my location without crunching a few leaves, no matter how slow I go. I planned for this by going in an hour earlier than usual so I could slow things down going in. I would guess that my encounter took place approximately 40 to 50 feet away from my stand, at a fork in the path the owners used for cutting timber. You could hear a pin drop in the darkness that morning when the sound of slow but heavy deliberate footsteps walking towards me in the dry leaves. This stops me cold in my tracks. I should tell you that I've bow hunted for 22 to 23 years at this time, and I certainly feel confident knowing the difference between a deer walking in the leaves in the darkness and something clearly coming toward me walking heel-toe, heel-toe. This lasted for maybe 5 to 7 minutes, as it started off farther away and gradually walked towards my sound of crunching leaves. I forced myself not turn on my flashlight in almost certain panic, knowing what this could be. When I stopped, the walking towards me stopped also, only to start again when I proceeded to take a couple more steps. It was unmistakable at this point that whatever this was is approaching me in the darkness. That would suck. Without knowing exactly how many more feet I was from my stand, I removed an arrow from my quiver and held it on my hand. At this moment, it sounds like it is surely within lunging range now, and my only thoughts were to shove this broadhead into whatever this is coming toward me. I gave in I gave in to not turning on my flashlight. As my next thought was that I need to find this tree stand now and get elevated to a safer level. I quickly covered the 30-40 feet in the darkness to reach my stand and climbed up, and I sat and I waited. And I listened intently for anything walking away in the darkness. I heard absolutely nothing leave and saw nothing leave when first light finally arrived. In closing, never have I gave it a second thought back then to the possibility of that being a Bigfoot. In watching your videos and many others I deem to be very credible, I seriously agree with you on this much. Thousands of people can't be considered liars. Lack of proof does not prove lack of existence. Many of the public know what they are seeing when they see it. And I saw nothing, but I heard what I will take to my grave someday, something I simply can't explain. Trespasser maybe? Not likely for someone trespassing to walk towards you. Usually it's the other way around with that scenario. Thanks for allowing me to share this unknown encounter. Scott in Wisconsin. There you go. Another example of something's there, but it's not. And there's no way it could have walked away. I've been in those hardwoods. It's so loud you can hear a mouse. You could never escape dead silent in those leaves from somebody that close. Never. Nothing could. Question on a picture is this next email. Hi Steve, I have no personal story, only a picture. This picture was taken in the mountains in North Powder, Oregon. The person that took the picture is an acquaintance of my niece and nephew. The man that took the picture said the foot, was larger than his 10.5 size boot. My question is, what's your opinion as to what made the print? A bear, Bigfoot, or something else? When you have the time, will you please respond to let me know what you think? Thank you for your time, Marilyn. All right, let's have a look. Right off the bat, it looks as though it's possibly the front pad of a bear. But then you see that weird print to the right. It might be a distorted toe, but it's not. It's actually a canine print. Probably coyote. Because there's a deer print to the lower right side of what appears to be the heel. That's a solid deer hoof print. Knowing how big your average deer is, especially in Oregon, and then you compare it to that canine print, which is probably a coyote. And if you do that, well, that print, there's no way it's much larger than a size 10.5 boot. So, who's to say? It could be a distorted print. I don't know, because the heel portion makes it a little confusing. And I know, believe me, I know all about bears stepping in the front and rear prints stepping each other. And it's always the rear print stepping on top of the front print. Always. So that makes it a little confusing because the rear print, if that heel print in this print was a bear's back foot, well, the bear's toes would be clear in the front pad. But anyway, it's a confusing picture. But there's all sorts of game just in that tiny area. There's two coyote prints, a deer print. I'm leaning towards no, but I wasn't there to see the other print or other prints. So I would be hesitant to think that was a legitimate Sasquatch print. Not that it matters. Not that it makes any difference whether they're there or not, because they are. Okay, what do we got? No coffee stains in the book yet. I'm sure it's coming. Now, this email is titled, Strange Encounter in Great Sand Dunes National Park, Colorado. Hello, before I share my story with you, I'd like to mention that I would prefer my email to remain anonymous, because I may have done some illegal camping. Alright, I don't share emails anyway, but I got you. The story. I took a last-minute road trip to the Great Sand Dunes National Park when I finally had some free time where I wasn't working at my current job. I lived in Texas, Fort Worth. Been to Fort Worth? Watched the cattle go down the street in the middle of town. And I've been wanting to visit the Sand Dune Park in Colorado for about a year. I've never seen real sand dunes before, so I was eager to visit whenever I had the chance. Unfortunately, my excitement led to a lack of planning and possibly some illegal wilderness camping. I say possibly illegal because although I bought a wilderness camping permit, I may have set up camp a little bit past the allowed zones for wilderness camping. Young and dumb I was. Maybe the laws are dumb. I can't picture buying a permit to go camping in the real world myself. I don't think I would ever do it. I'd just go. Anyways, I arrived at the sand dune park around sunset, and when I parked, I wasted no time and started my 2-hour hike to the top of the sand dune ridge at approximately these coordinates. As I was walking towards my destination, I noticed that there was no one else camping within a 3-mile radius of my chosen campsite. I heard no noise, laughter, or partying, and I did not see any other tents as far as I could see from my campsite. I was camped on the top of a ridge with a somewhat crappy tent that I purchased from Target. I was just excited to sleep outdoors and wake up to the open and secluded wilderness of these beautiful sand dunes. The night began very quiet. I had not put my rain cover on my tent yet, so I was able to see the very bright stars through the mesh of my tent. As I was laying down, it was so quiet that the sound of my breath and heartbeat was the loudest thing I could hear. At around 11:30 p.m., the wind started to pick up. There was sand blowing through the mesh of my tent and onto my sleeping system and myself. So I got up, went out of the tent to put on the rain cover to prevent any more sand from getting in. At around 12:15 a.m., the wind became so strong that the corners of my very cheap tent started to lift up. My own body weight, backpack, and cooler were the only things keeping the tent from not flying away with the wind. The wind alone was scary, but it eventually died down at 12:45-ish. I thought that was scary, and it was, but something even more unsettling happened. The wind died down a lot, and I was comfortable enough to feel safe enough to sleep, and then I started hearing footsteps in the sand right outside my tent, and it sounded bipedal. I remember the pacing of the footsteps. I heard the sand move as the weight of whatever I heard crunched down on the coarse sand. I heard the careful displacement of the sand, and there was about a second in between each footstep. At first I thought it was light wind on my tent, but as I listened closer, I realized the sound was coming from at least 6 feet from my tent. I heard no plastic moving, which would have indicated the tent was making the noise. I just heard the steady and slow footsteps within the sand, pacing back and forth near my tent. The footsteps were slow, as if my campsite was being stalked. I was too young to own a handgun at the time, and I didn't choose to bring my AR on this trip, although I really wish I did. My only weapon was an 11-inch long combat knife. As I heard these footsteps, I was frozen in my sleeping bag, gripping my knife. I was terrified because I had never encountered any sound like this, and I was a 2-hour hike away from my car. As I gripped my knife, ready to stab anything that moved, I was riddled with the chills and I could not move my body. I kept my breath completely silent. The footsteps went on for 10 minutes or so, but I'm certain my fight-or-flight mind was not actually capable of keeping track of how much time actually went by. At some point, I decided that I had to look outside my tent. I very reluctantly grabbed my lantern and unzipped my tent with my combat knife in the other hand. I was terrified, but it was so dark outside that my cheap Target lantern wasn't bright enough to illuminate my surroundings. I couldn't hear the footsteps anymore, but I couldn't see anything past 5 feet from where I was standing. I picked up what was already packed up and prepared myself to run towards my car. I was so terrified that I didn't even take down my tent. I just grabbed my tent while it was still set up and dragging it down to my car while the poles were still in it. I was simply too freaked out to spend any time disassembling my tent because of those creepy footsteps. Yeah, lots of people have done the same move, man. A lot. As I walked through the sand downhill in the moonlight, I turned around every 10 seconds or so, and I didn't hear any more footsteps, luckily. And I felt safer as I got closer and closer to the parking lot. I usually hate sleeping in my car, but once I got to the car and laid down in the safe, enclosed trunk, I slept like a baby. This experience has greatly affected my desire and willingness to camp alone. I still get around to hike, even when I'm alone in the woods, but I simply do not feel comfortable sleeping without other people nearby because of this experience. I know what I heard, I know how I felt, and I have no idea what it could have been. It sounded like a regular person of average weight pacing back and forth close to my tent. It really freaked me out. If anyone has had a similar experience to this, I'd love more information about it because I'm not sure what caused those stalker-like footsteps. Thanks to you. Thank you if you decide to read my story. God bless, Godspeed. Amen. Okay, man. Happens all the time. It's a classic sound experience that people have here, accompanied with the sightings of these people. Why do they do it? Dunno. I think this is the follow-up. Patient sighting is the title of this email. Hi, Steve. I emailed you last week about my rock throwing incident, not long after having immigrated to BC from the UK. Like I told you over the years, through my work, I got some accounts from select people via my work. One told to me really stands out. I gotta fix these glasses. It's not working on the outside of this. There we go. Like I told you over the years, through my work, I got some accounts from select people via my work. One told to me really stands out in particular, and I thought I'd share it with you. Not your average one, in my opinion. The person is originally from Northern Ireland and moved to British Columbia at the age of 20. Being English, let me assure you, the average Canadian would struggle to understand a word of his thick Belfast accent. And he's clearly never lost it after all these years. Yeah, one of my best friends is the same accent, grew up in Belfast. I'd always bug him, when are you going to learn Canadian? Great guy. Crazy stories from Belfast. He had a motorbike back in Ireland. And quickly on arriving here, he bought a bike and rode this thing everywhere, he said. He eventually got into bear hunting and loved the outdoors and was fit as a fiddle for his age. He's now around 70 and still hikes regularly. He's just a solid individual. He told me the first year or two he was here was out on his bike going up an old logging road, from what he recalls, around the Mission area in the Lower Mainland. In his own words, so he basically saw a Sasquatch sunbathing on a rocky ledge above the road. When I asked him why he said sunbathing, he said it was lying on one side, propped up on its elbow and bent knees. He kept telling me he saw a giant, naked, hairy man. And this is what he thought it was. A giant man. What I find amusing is that he said he waved at the thing as he was approaching it on his bike. He then said it got up real quick, and he slammed the brakes as he suddenly realized how big it was. He said it booked it straight up into the mountain, through the forest as quick as a man could sprint on flat road. He said looking back now, especially after years of hiking through mountains and bush, that the speed of it was unbelievable, impossible for a human to do. He said a year or so later he was with a girlfriend flicking through a magazine and saw a drawing of a Sasquatch, and he simply said, "Oh, I've seen that," to her and her friends. He thought it was a normal occurrence. They laughed at him and proceeded to tell him about the mythology behind it, and he remained steadfast and told them, it's a giant man. And this is what he still maintains these things are. Hairy, giant people. Excuse me, not some primate. As a practicing physiotherapist, I was not going to let him leave without getting some more details about its appearance. He told me when it stood up, he was shocked at its size and height. And bear in mind, he's now an experienced hunter and outdoorsman, not fresh off the plane like he was all those years ago. He reckons it was about 8 feet tall, and the shoulders around 4 feet wide. He said everything, apart from the face, was covered in hair, not fur, reddish-brown in color. He said the area around the chest and the abdomen was thinner, and he could see darker skin. In his own words, the muscles were bloody massive. and he described it as having a beautiful physique, very wide shoulders, immense chest, and upper body thickness with tree trunk legs. He said you could clearly see the individual muscle definition, especially as it moved. Just proportions way beyond what we assume is possible. When asked why he thought it was a man, he said it had huge pectoral muscles and no breasts, and the obvious part of its anatomy clearly made no mistake about its gender. He jokingly said he would clearly be popular with the girls. I've been working as a physiotherapist since 1996. Let me tell you, when you spend your day speaking with different individuals, you get very good at deciphering if somebody's telling you lies or not. Agreed. And not once did I think this fellow was telling porky pies. He just kept saying very matter-of-factly, it's a giant, naked man. He really blew my mind telling me this. And the funny thing is, he very reluctantly refers to it as a Sasquatch and prefers to call it a giant man. He said people are talking shit about it being some kind of an ape. He said, unfortunately, even with all his years of hiking and hunting, he never saw one again. He was adamant. He has smelt them very close and said they have a very unique smell, nothing at all like bear or other animals. Being told this in person has always made it stay fresh in my mind. Unique circumstances for an inexperienced immigrant, at the same time so special. When I returned home later that day, I actually wrote down the details as I was so blown away by his account. Apologies for the length of the email, but I wanted to relay the things he told me. I've got other reports told to me by patients, but this one by far is the most mind-blowing. Cheers, Rob. There you go. Appreciate that, man. Mission. Yeah, that was almost to a T the description my grandfather saw too, right? Right down to the color, the whole 9 yards. Big, hairy, reddish hair-covered guy, naked guy. First you thought it was a fur coat, guy in a fur coat, but yeah, that whole area, Mission, if you're looking at the map, Mission, Harrison, Hope, Boston Bar, Lytton, Lillooet, Pemberton, Whistler, Squamish, Garibaldi Park right in the middle. The amount of sightings in those areas is frickin' stupid. And they are there. They are there a lot. Full time, haven't a clue. A lot? A lot. Now let's get back to Bobbie's book. This section was flagged by Molly as behaviors begin here. And here they are, right? So you imagine how much is here that we could dive into, so I'm just skimming through it. There's one title here titled Bigfoot Hunting Turkeys. This is in the behaviors. Quote, Dear Bigfoot Encounters, I'm a Kansas wheat producer. Several years ago, I was working the harvest with the usual grain combine when something made a clatter noise. I stopped quickly and climbed out of the cab to see what it was. I was parked in a section of land sandwiched between a runoff and a creek that takes water to the house and feeds our well. After checking the equipment, I went to get back behind the wheel to carry on. It was then I spotted this dark thing making a run across the field about 40 yards in front of me. I climbed up into the cab and watched this giant man figure burst out of nowhere and shoot across my field, which was an uncut section of wheat. I did not believe what I was seeing. It was a reddish-brown color with hair over its body, the whole body. I'm thinking, what the? These things are real? It took me several minutes to collect my thoughts. The Bigfoot quickly gathered up 2 turkeys before they could get airborne. Whoa. This Bigfoot quickly gathered up 2 turkeys before they could get airborne and headed for the trees that bordered the creek on the lower section. I've never seen anything like that in my life. I'm sober, age 57, of sound mind. Because of the wheat and corn around here, we've always had excellent turkey hunts. But nobody ever knew had a Bigfoot to deal with. Is it possible that there was only one of them around here? It was early morning, 8:15 a.m. If you need to know, and that was the last I saw of it. It maybe lasted a half a minute or less, and as to its size, I don't have a guess. I raise my hand, this is true. Please don't use my real name or email address. My family is known here, thank you. Kansas, 06. Crazy, right? I hunted Kansas. We used to go in the celebrity invitational, whatever you call it, world turkey hunting competition in Kansas. Big time turkeys there. There you go, hunting turkeys. Now, what's this one? Sasquatch clucking and gobbling. No way. According to its length, this next bit of correspondence should have been placed under favorite stories, but because it mentions turkey vocalizations, I decided to place it here. The informant was a neighborhood fellow that lived next door to a member on the staff at the medical school near Paducah, Kentucky. He became very excited when I spoke with him by phone, and here's the condensed version of his 8-page account. Oh, she condensed it. Quote, "We purchased a house/large cabin type a year ago in an area that backs up to what's known as the Daniel Boone National Forest, Kentucky. The back of my place has a 16-foot wide by a 30-foot wooden deck that cantilevers off the back side of the main house, extending out and under the tree foliage. It is supported by 6x6 wooden beam stanchions that holds up the porch. The deck is 11 feet or so off the ground. On top of that deck, there's a 4-foot railing capped on top where the wife puts her plants and several assorted bird feeders. From the railing top to the ground slope is between 10 to 15 feet. The height is important to gauge the height of the Bigfoot." Here we go. Things still working? Yep. "On the side of our property, there is a narrow 3-foot wide dirt game trail that goes up into some of the most rugged terrain a man can imagine. It is characterized by rolling mountains, steep grades, deep gullies, and sharp overhangs. It is hardwood, old-growth trees. The forest turns magnificent colors in the fall. That is why we bought the place. A few stories came along with the purchase of the house by way of the real estate agent. The previous owners told her they kept up the bird feeders, and once 2 bear cubs got up on the deck and tore up the deck furniture pretty good, knocking over the bird bath. There are claw markings on the support beams to verify her account, and some claw marks on the railing topper. A few railing slats went missing and were never found. The other tale was about 2 bears that came up and ate from the bird feeders at night. We've been there a year now, and have seen no bears. At the long end of the decking is a staircase that goes down to the ground and meets up with the game trail that takes off into the underbrush that is otherwise too thick to walk through. But on to the story. I was half sleeping, half reading a book when I heard a gobbler calling. What a strange air there was about the place that morning. I sat up and listened. From under this porch where I had been dozing off, there came a soft clucking sounds, like turkey hen clucking sounds. In case you don't know, Kentucky, especially the Daniel Boone National Forest, brags about having the best turkey hunts in the USA. That's true. We never have to buy Thanksgiving turkeys up here. I relaxed and laid back. Then I heard a loud gobble coming from what sounded like a big old tom under the porch, and it was answered by another tom clucking in the trees. The gobbling continued along with intermittent clucking, and I thought 2 things. First, they probably are lunching on spilled bird seed from the porch feeders, and 2, where did my wife put my scatter gun? I went in the house, took a few minutes to pack shells in my Browning A5, and hurried back onto the porch, but it was quiet again. I lay back on the chase, the Browning shotgun across my lap, and waited, thinking turkeys ain't going to be too bright. Maybe he would fly up on the porch and get after the good seeds, but time passed, maybe 30 minutes with no clucking sounds, and then off in the woods I hear them clucking with an occasional gobble. I figured they moved on. So my enthusiasm diminished some, and I fell asleep again. And then it says, freak of nature. I woke up with the sun beating down on my head. I sat upright and figured I'd go into the house for a bite of lunch. I no sooner had I got to my feet when straight ahead of me, off the porch, comes a very loud gobble. I look, I see this crazy thing, this freak of nature, standing on the staircase that leads up to the deck. I jump back, startled. I reached for the shotgun, aimed quickly, and fired. Boom. The shot tore a bunch of the railing. A flower pot and wood went flying. The birds scattered, and so did this freak. The best look I got of it was him leaping off the porch stairs and flying up the dirt path. My hunting buddy comes flying out of the house with a loud, "What the hell?" And I pointed. Harold saw what I saw as it fled up the game trail. We only saw it for a second and it was gone. I tell you, it moved. We go into the house and talk it over and decide to load up and go look for sign. Neither of us thought much about Bigfoot, but that is what we seen. Down on the dirt path, we discovered tracks of a barefooted man that were 18 inches long, showing 5 toes on the left foot and 4 toes on the right. The little toe was missing. The tracks went on for a quarter mile and then left the path. We went up a steep precipice with sharp rocks that hung over the dirt path, and it was the perfect place to ambush deer, and thinking we could get ambushed, thought better of following the tracks any further. We sat down in the shadows and watched until 4 that afternoon, but we never saw anything but squirrels that continually chirped their warning signal that we were in there. You see, squirrels never give up. Their danger chirping goes on all night. One more thing. What we saw was nothing like the Monster Quest television program. This guy was enormous, with hair hanging over its face like a sheepdog. We mostly saw its backside, which was covered in short body hair. But little detail of anything else. It happened very fast and it was gone. If it wasn't a Bigfoot we saw that day, then you folks should know that Kentucky turkeys come haired, not feathered, or 10 feet tall and partial to stealing bird seed. There you go. A lot of detail there to think up when you wake up in the morning and try to say to yourself, what should I make up today, right? Kentucky. There is so many. You got to think of how many people have written in here, and then you got to think of how many people Bobbie spoke to, huh? There's so much. It's endless. It's absolutely endless. Listen to this. Childhood encounter recalls a gentle giant. The next report began this way. In 1989, my girlfriend came to my house for a sleepover. I lived rurally and up the road from my parents' trailer. There was logging, a clear-cutting operation where her dad worked. My mom and dad were gone someplace for the evening, and we were left alone for a while. There was no TV. We ate spaghetti, went out to play, and walked it off. We headed up the road and ended up climbing up on the equipment, jumping off the big machines that were left there over the weekend. We fooled around, talked about what children talk about, but it was getting dark and there were no streetlights in the woods. And when it gets dark, it's like you can't see your hand in front of your face. And as we came back into the woods from the clear-cut area, for some reason, both of us got scared and started holding hands and shivering. My friend thought she saw something, and thinking it was her dad, we began running towards him, but instead ran straight into the legs of something that was like the monster under my bed in my childhood nightmares. It was brownish black, had fur on its bony-looking legs. It was the best I can remember first thinking. I recall holding on to Mary with all I had and screaming, and she screamed too. A hand came down on my shoulders and moved us aside with the gentleness of Shrek. But I get the willies when I think of that hairy hand touching the back of my shoulder. The monster man had been standing in the road and in the darkness of the trees, and our young stupidity, we ran right into him. I think he moved us aside, but maybe he stepped aside and pushed us towards home. I'm not sure how we got around him. Only that we did, and ran blindly back to our trailer and locked ourselves in my bedroom until my parents got home. This wasn't a young girl's story. I know now that it was a Bigfoot, and they are as big as people say. One thing I haven't forgotten was that on top of our screaming, we heard him breathing. So we knew it was real. Thank you for your time. Mrs. H.J., Washington State. Every kid's frickin' nightmare, right? Every kid's nightmare. It's endless. Page after page after page after page. Sasquatch crying like a baby. In 2002, my Cincinnati Reds baseball bud, veteran cryptozoologist, and the creator of Creature Chronicles, Ron Schaffner, forwarded me 2 articles from his extensive collection. One article mentioned the additional behavior of a lone young child crying. The story ran in the Albuquerque Journal. The Bernalillo County, New Mexico Sheriff's Department was skeptical about frequent phone calls concerning the abominable monster. It was covered with hair, with a blank-looking face, reportedly roaming around South Valley, crying like a baby. According to Sheriff Dale Nabel and Art Fuso, the small 5-foot-tall hair-covered creature wandered through backyards unclothed and bawling loudly. It scared the children and one woman. There's a lot on crying, holding hands, strange use of the hands, draws water to its mouth with the cupped hand signal. Wow, she's got photos in here too. Swimming, rock throwing, mouth noises. Very detailed, endless examples of Sasquatch behaviors. Basically, most of it sounds like human behaviors, right? Anyway, there we go. Elk hunting. Ooh, all right. I'm going to hold this one. I'm going to hold this one here for next time. So much. Isn't it crazy? It's not crazy anymore. It's kind of crazy, but it's not. I guess I should probably get going to carry on my day. I got a lot to get caught up on. We've got a lot of people to email too. Get set up here to get some people talking out loud. Excuse me. All right, I'm going to read one more. One more. Recent. Snuck up on it while hunting. Cousin's garage. By the way, what I saw run under Daryl's porch was all black, running on 2 legs, and its arms were almost as long as it was tall. That's creepy. Oh, this is a long one. Oh well, whatever. I'm going to get it done. Hey Steve, I found your channel while info hunting for these things a year or 2 ago. And let me say, that this was all in Southern Virginia, in the tri-state area, 32 miles from Tennessee. This was Virginia, not West Virginia. I know a lot of people think West Virginia when you say Virginia. My story with these things starts at 8 years old. I was in my room playing. The room was in the corner of the house, closest to the woods next to the house. These woods were about 10 yards from the house. My mother and stepdad were in the living room partying with friends on the other end of the house. I was supposed to be going to bed. Of course, I was still up playing with toys in my room, since I could hear them laughing and talking in the other room. Then I progressed. I started looking out my window facing the woods. I kept feeling like there was something out there. At some point, my mom and stepdad began to argue with each other. I was getting really stressed out, trying my best to ignore them. I just wanted to play till I got tired so I could fall asleep. Not very long into their argument/fight, I began to hear this noise that I can only compare to an owl outside my window. And as I listened and looked at the window, trying to figure out what it was, I began to feel this euphoric feeling like I was outside of myself. I thought I could see the owl sitting on my window ledge, but I just couldn't get up to get to the window to look at it better. Last thing I remember was looking at the big-eyed creature looking at me through the window. Then I woke up to my mom picking me up, asking me what I was doing sleeping on the floor. I told her I didn't know. I was watching the owl. I can't verify that it was one of those beings, but this was a brick house, and my window seal was a single brick window seal. It would have been some type of owl. I would have seen its body touching the window, but that was not the case. The window was about 6-7 feet off the ground. Now, this experience just came back to me while listening to your most recent shares, and I'm certain that it was my first. My brother and I played in those woods next to the house every day, all day. Mom would yell at meal times. We would eat and go right back out. My gut tells me this is a female that had probably been watching us a very long time all those years playing in those woods. Is trying to soothe me, I guess, feeling my stress from the battle that was going on at the other end of the house. Now let me tell you about the time I went hunting by myself over in Saltville, Virginia. I borrowed my friend Daryl's rifle to go hunting. I was hungry and broke at the time. He fed me something and let me go hunting with his rifle. Awesome guy, I might add, who passed away not long ago. So I took the rifle, started walking down the road till I found a spot I felt was good to enter. I hiked my way through the thick for a mile or so, up and over a couple hills. I got on top of this one hill, looked, trying to make up my mind where I wanted to post up. I saw a tri-cluster of hills and thought, that's going to be a great spot. I could see some good valley choke points that would funnel the game through there. So I made my way over and up the first hill in that area, to the top and found a beaten down trail on the ridge. There are a few downed trees that were crossed next to this trail with brush surrounding. So I climbed into it at the point of the crossing up the cross-facing trail. I sat in that spot for 3 to 4 hours listening and watching. I got tired of this spot and decided to move out of it. So I rolled over as I was laying and looked down the hill. And I saw a massive fox squirrel coming up the hill from the Choke Point Valley. I decided it would be great. It saw me, and I thought towards it, please don't start chattering and give me away. It stared and then went on its way. And after it left, I got up and slowly made my way down, being as quiet as possible, avoiding stick breaks and such. As I was moving down, I started to hear something walking around down the hill from me. I hunkered down next to a large oak. I watched and listened. Couldn't see anything. The vines and brush in that area was so thick, I just waited and watched where I thought it might come out on each side of the thick. The more I listened to it, I thought that's way too big for a deer. Maybe it's a bear. Then I heard a massive stick or branch break, and I just thought maybe it's a Bigfoot. I'd always somewhat believed watching Finding Bigfoot and such, so I picked up an oak branch and put my back to the tree between it and myself. The oak was massive, so it had me blocked just fine. I took this stick and started smacking the tree lightly, but loud enough to where it could hear me. Uh-oh. That's when I heard the loudest noise I've ever heard in the woods ever. Creepow! This thing either broke a small tree in half or ripped a large branch out of a tree. It was so loud it echoed through the valley and almost hurt my ears. I didn't hear nothing hit the ground, just pure silence. That's when I felt anger/hate directed towards me. It started to get me scared. So I got mad. Madder than I've ever been. I felt like I was on fire. If I could explain the way I felt when I was mad like that, I would say the flame on my body were 20 feet tall. I came around the side of that tree with my rifle at my hip fire position. I looked down that way and I said, I don't know what you are, but you better not come up here or I'll put this thing in you. I heard nothing, no movement, no sound, but the slight breeze to my left. Now, the way I was raised, you don't fight unless it's something you gotta do. So I proceeded to say, if you don't come up here, I won't come down there. I felt at a disadvantage because I knew it could see me through the foliage. But I just couldn't make anything out. It was so thick. You know how it works when you're in the thick of it and you can peer out of the small holes better than you can see in. Whatever this was had a blind, and I was in the open. So I looked back and saw a washout cliff about 50 yards behind me to the left. I proceeded to step backwards towards it, quickly checking to make sure I wasn't going to trip on anything, but maintaining eyes in the direction of where I heard this. Scanning nonstop, I didn't want it to somehow make it out and around and flank me. I got to this washed out cliff spot, put my back to it, and just waited and watched, non-stop, scanning, kept my rifle facing up above me with my finger on the trigger, just in case it got above me somehow. What a shitty, stressful position, right? Had no intentions of running because I just had a feeling whatever this was smart, since I never got eyes on it other than its movement through that foliage. So I spoke out with my back to that cliff. Do not come anywhere near me. I don't want to fight with you, but I'll die protecting myself if I have to. Eventually I started to feel calm, so I sat down, continued my hunt from my position. I didn't see a lick of anything. I sat there for at least another 2 hours. Not a squirrel, nothing. So I decided I'm going to head back now. I really felt like whatever it was had moved to the hill across from me and was watching me from there. I went down the hill towards the clearing in the valley below that I've been watching, and I felt like it was on the hill on the other side of this valley, but I figured my best chance was getting in the open to where I could see better. I'll tell you what, when I go into that clearing, I never felt more paranoid. Non-stop scanning as I walked, checking behind me to make sure I wasn't being followed either. And as I walked through that clearing, trying to circle around the hill back towards the road, I saw a set of thorns on the ground next to the woods. Walked up to them, and it was a buck's skull and spine, and that was it. No other bones anywhere near. When I picked this up, I felt peace. I just knew I had nothing to worry about anymore. So I continued my hike around, and the clearing was opening up into a field, and that's when I heard a whoop. I turned around and looked at the top of the hill where I heard it. The sun was on the top of the hill, but I could see a large figure at the top. And that's when I saw a movement. It was a doe. She was running straight into the wind at me, down the hill, coming from the direction of that figure. I dropped the buck's skull, brought my rifle up. She made it into the clearing right in front of me. I went meep to stop her. She stopped there, breathing heavily, stressed out badly, looking right at me. Put my sight right on her heart and lung area, click, and nothing. I looked at my rifle and the damn bolt had come unlocked. She took off right around me and kept going. I was irritated, totally shocked, realizing if that thing would have come at me, my rifle would have done nothing. Been there with the grizzly bear. I looked back up the hill and I couldn't see it anymore, so I made my way the rest of the way out, feeling it watched me the whole time. I brought Daryl his rifle back, and never once did I mention what happened or tell anyone until recently. It just felt like I was going to be called crazy over it. So I'm almost done here. Just want to share this next instance that happened a month later near that same area. So I was with my cousins, and we're having a fish fry. My cousin, little Bud, was neighbors with Daryl and lived downhill from him. I just got done eating and was out sitting on the porch step of one of his buildings, just watching for deer and stuff. It was dark out, about 10. Everyone was in the garage drinking and stuff. I was just doing me, waiting on a friend to show up. And then I saw something move real fast from Daryl's porch into the weeds and bamboo next to little Bud's garage. I thought, well, what was that? So I got up, pulled out my phone, and pretended I was looking at it. I circled around towards Daryl's kinda, and started to walk down towards little Bud's garage. I stared at my phone the whole time, just watching these weeds out of the edge of my vision. I got up to where I thought this thing was. Then turned and looked right into the weeds, trying to make something out. Took one step closer. Then this thing shrieked and took off up the hill under Daryl's porch and around. Then it went around. It hit its shoulder on one of the porch posts, holding it up. That porch sounded like one of those door stoppers, kinda. Boing, you know what I mean? That all happened in a matter of 2 or 3 seconds. And Daryl came out and asked, "What the hell are you doing on my porch?" I said, "It wasn't me. Something just took off under your porch around the house and up into the woods." He grabbed his flashlight and went up into the woods looking for what it was and found nothing. Daryl's porch was 6 feet off the ground. I guess that thing had to have been around 4 feet tall. I went down into the garage after it. I went down into the garage after it, all told little Bud. They all told me, "You've been smoking too much weed," even though I had not smoked anything but my cigarette. No one believed me, which made me feel more justified in not sharing my hunting story. And that was 4 years ago. And I'm in Ohio now. My granny told me she or he burnt the weeds and bamboo between his and Daryl's house a few months ago. I wonder why. I bet he saw something in them he didn't believe existed, is my guess. He loved that bamboo and was really proud of it and made stuff out of it often. I've had one other experience where I saw one. I shared it in the comments section of one of the recent videos, kind of a shorthand version. I appreciate all you do with knowledge sharing about these matters. My best advice to any listeners is that if you feel like you're in the woods with one of these things, don't start beating on trees. It pisses them off. It might be some sort of territorial thing for them. I would never go looking for these things intentionally, especially not since I have family now. I sometimes have a dream I'm camping with my family, and a large one of those things comes out of the woods headed for us. I'm screaming at my family to get out of here. While I stand my ground, ready to stop it from getting them, I feel like they feel the same way about us sometimes. Leave them be. If you encounter them, muster your courage and speak out and tell them your intentions. All of you, be safe and don't give up on your wilderness passions. I know I'm not. Thanks forever, Steve. You're awesome. Have a blessed day. Donovan. Appreciate that, man. Good for you coming forward and sharing your experiences honestly here. You're a brave man. Brave, honest man. I've run around the woods in West Virginia. Lots of hills, lots of hardwood leaves around there, huh? Pretty tough to not hear anything moving in those hardwood forests. I don't normally hunt them. Well, you guys see where I go, right? But anyways, I gotta run. I just got a text from the big boss. I gotta get my ass in and eat breakfast. So I better go run and do that, and then I'm gonna come back out here and get this room done. I'll be back tomorrow. I got a whole bunch of stuff I was going to talk about, but I think I used up my time right now, so I'll be back tomorrow. Share my story at howtohunt.com. Keep it coming. Just keep it coming. Keep it flowing. Right? Just keep it coming. Truth, the truth wins every time.